Yesterday, we looked at power in a different dimension. We looked at power in a different practical application. A key element of hope is knowing you have access to power. But the reality of today's world is that today's Christian finds themselves in a very complex situation. We hear it on the news all the time. We hear it across the media all the time. They're talking about this cost of living crisis. There's workers going on strike. There's industrial action happening. There's changes happening in the supermarkets. People like me who only rarely have to go out and do shopping. You go out shopping and you wonder how the missus copes. Because you pick 4 or 5 things and put it in the basket, you get to the till and you have a shock. You wonder how they've been coping. It's all around us. And interestingly, when we talk about the cost of living crisis, we were talking about the reality where cost of everyday essentials, the energy, your food, your travel, it's rising higher than the average household income. We're feeling the pinch. We're feeling the pinch. And it's becoming ever so interesting when you begin to realize that the little surpluses you would have before that you could use to manage things here and there, those surpluses seem to be drying up. Those surpluses just seem to dry up. And if you're like me, the kind of people I describe as first-generation migrants, the second generation are lucky. Our children are lucky because they only have to deal with their lives in here in the UK. First-generation migrants like me, you live in 2 lives. There's a life you're living here in the UK. There's a life you left behind from your country of origin. And you've got the cost of living crisis biting you here, and it's biting them down there as well. So across the 2 perspectives, you're feeling the pinch. And the Christian is right in the middle of all of this. And things are not easy for the Christian. And so a question I keep getting asked repeatedly is, what is a Christian supposed to do? How is a Christian supposed to deal with this cost of living crisis? Now, long before the cost of living crisis even became an issue, I always said there were 2 sides to the financial Christian experience. And it's always been interesting for me, right? There's some people who seem to be very special. They are the ones with the big testimonies. They are the ones with the big breakthroughs. They are the ones who seem to be demonstrating some unique kind of financial power, and they are doing all kinds of things. I mean, you check your social media, they are there, you know. And interestingly, these people are the ones you hear about the most. And even there are some churches within which people are beginning to feel that unless they have these kind of testimonies, then God is not with them. People are actually beginning to stay away from certain churches because they think that it's taking them too long to break through financially. And people are thinking that, oh, there must be some hidden sin in their life, or there must be some hidden wrong they are doing, and that is why they are not breaking through, you know. So on the other side of the fence, you have those who are just waiting and hoping for a breakthrough. And it gets very confusing because it's the same God we're worshiping. So if he's coming through fantastically for some of these people, why is he not coming through fantastically for us? And then you add even the third complication, where because of social media and the freedom of information we have these days, you then begin to hear all kinds of things. You see one brother that you believed was doing so well and the hand of God was with him. Next thing you hear, there's a scandal, and you realize that all that exhibition was actually the result of illegal activity. And you think, wait a minute. After all the posturing, the surprise comes out and you realize, oh, wait a minute. So then you go back to the drawing board and ask yourself, these breakthroughs, these miracles, are they really genuine? Are they really genuine? And for me, what really lies on my heart is not these special ones. They can stay in their speciality. I'm more interested about people like me who are facing the day-to-day challenges in very tricky situations and still trying their best to maintain a moral compass in a society that seems to dictate that the only way to enjoy some success is to break rules. We see the leaders breaking rules. They are supposed to be our example. We hear the scandals happening. And there are more scandals affecting ministers than ever in the history of this charismatic race. And you're thinking, if these guys supposedly at the top are having these exposures, how about those of us who see ourselves on the lower rung of the ladder? How is a Christian supposed to deal with this challenge, this financial challenge? It was very interesting when I just cast my mind back historically, and I recall the days when the overall message was that it was actually spiritually good and righteous to be poor. I don't know where that particular concept came from, but it was around. I think the story of Lazarus and the rich man has something to do with it. But, that concept was around for a very long time, and we thought that, poor people seem to have a direct line to heaven or something, Then along came the charismatics, and next thing we knew, boom, here comes the prosperity gospel. And then suddenly, it became a sin to be poor. What was once holy is now considered sinful, because then, for some reason, the power of God is not working through your life. And the interesting thing is that the level of opulence now beginning to be displayed among our charismatics now makes it a case where even those who are not Christians look at you, the Christian, and they expect you to display that same level of opulence, because that is the overarching image. And along come the testimonies. You will hear some testimonies, and sometimes you have to double check and ask yourself, is this even possible? Is this even possible? And these testimonies are constantly on your social media feed. You hardly go a week without seeing something on social media that is showing some fantastic breakthrough, some fantastic achievement, and you're left wondering, how about the rest of us? How about the rest of us? Is there some secret somewhere that has been hidden from us? Like, how about the rest of us? It is confusing. It's a very financially confusing time to be a Christian. Because really, you don't know where the compass lies anymore. You don't know where the compass lies anymore. So, in line with the theme of our celebration of keeping hope alive, this evening, we're going to look at how we keep financial hope alive. Keeping financial hope alive. There's 3 things to be aware of. There are a lot of myths. There are a lot of myths. A lot of the information out there, a lot of the presentations out there, a lot of them are pure fake. There are some very harsh realities to face, very difficult realities, and there are some very real dangers out there. Like I said, it's a very challenging time to be a Christian. Very financially challenging time. Before I go much further, though, I want to make one thing clear. And I always find this reaction whenever I go and I'm speaking to Christian audiences about money. I have not come to lead you into temptation. No. Because somewhere along the line as well, Christians got this perception that money is evil, or anything to do with money is evil. So that when you have people coming and talking to you about money and financial reality or something, somehow those people, they are trying to tempt you to follow mammon, or they are trying to tempt you down the line of evil. No, I have not come to lead you into temptation. What I've come to do is to open your eyes to some harsh realities. Some of what I'm going to say this evening will not be pleasant. But those of you who have known me well enough, you know me, you see controversy. I say it the way it is. That I can guarantee. I want us to look at the Apostle Paul and some of the points he made, particularly where money and finance was concerned. Now, the interesting thing about the Apostle Paul is that Christian commentators will tell you that modern Christianity, as we have it, the charismatic Christianity, has been shaped to a very large extent by the teachings and the writings of this apostle. The bulk of the New Testament, in fact, where most New Testament doctrine is drawn from, are from the letters written by this apostle to various churches and various congregations around during his time. Now, he makes one interesting series of statements in writing to Timothy, in the book of 1 Timothy. He starts by saying, but godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money, I repeat, the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. I want to repeat that sentence again. He says, for the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. We will come back to revisit this, but I want you to just store that for me for the time being. Then writing to the Philippians, he then says, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances may be. He says, I know now how to live when things are difficult, and I know how to live when things are prosperous. In general and in particular, I have learned the secret of eating well or going hungry, of facing either plenty or poverty. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That final sentence is one of the most misapplied sentences in the Christ. I can tell you, it's one of the most misapplied sentences. They ignore the text. They just take the text and ignore the context. But in order to set context, this is what he talked about having learned to be content. And the same man writing to Timothy talks about contentment. And therein, for me, lies a potential controversy. Because when you see people talking about contentment, you know there's inadequacy. Bottom line. Nobody talks about contentment when there's plenty. If someone is talking about contentment, it's because there's inadequacy. And the challenge with financial situations is that everybody has their own unique situation. You can give somebody £1,000 a month and they'll live like a king. You give somebody that same £1,000 a month, you have barely scratched the bottom. And the need for adequacy is in direct contravention with contentment. Because contentment says, even though it is inadequate, I will make myself okay with it. Adequacy says, this is what I need, and this is what I need to get. with adequacy, I'm not talking about surplus. I'm talking about adequacy. And the interesting thing is that the Apostle Paul, who talks about adequacy in other aspects of his writing, but then teaches contentment aggressively, was actually somebody who could afford to be content. The man virtually lived alone. He didn't have a wife. He didn't have kids. Didn't have family drawing on him. No. So he could come to a town, work as a tent maker, be comfortable, be content. He may not have luxury, but he was content. Small problem. Most people I encounter, particularly Christian parents, cannot operate in contentment. What they need is adequacy. You cannot be content when your mortgage takes 3/4 of your income out by direct debit. I mean, they pay you today, tomorrow mortgage comes like that, and you are left with less than 1/4 of your other bills having come. Other bills having come. Other direct debits having come. You cannot be content. If you are content in that situation, one day they'll turn off your lights. You, as the dad, might be content in darkness because maybe you grew up in a country where we had the Chinese lantern. But the children you have brought up in this country, it doesn't work for them. This is harsh reality. It sounds unpleasant, it sounds unorthodox, but this is harsh reality. Don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing the Apostle Paul. I'm just trying to point out the premise from which he was speaking. He was describing his circumstances. He says, I have learned. For him to learn means circumstances force that learning upon him. If circumstances didn't demand it, he wouldn't have needed to learn. But what the Christian needs is above contentment. Because the reality of our modern life is that the Christian cannot dissociate himself from his relationship with money. It's just not possible. It's just not possible. Everywhere, your home life, your work life, even your support of the ministry you belong to, all of these things require money. This microphone I'm using had to be paid for. The system through which this microphone runs has to be maintained. The lights that make it possible for you to see me come at a cost. That's the harsh reality we're living in. It would be great if it was different. You know, like the days of Moses. And even what I tend to tell people is that even in the days of manna and quail, when you went back out there, people actually had to go out and collect the manna. God didn't drop the manna into people's tents. They had to go out and collect it. And on the 6th day, they had to collect a double dose because the 7th day now was going to come. So even on the 6th day, you had to begin to think ahead. Even when it is falling from heaven. That's a harsh reality. Now, I want us to look at someone else. I want us to look at the master. That man, Jesus. Now, this man brought a gospel. Like yesterday, I was explaining that there were two sides to his gospel. There was salvation and there was principles. Now, within the teaching of his principles, a lot of his principles had to do with life, day-to-day life, the challenges of day-to-day life, the realities of day-to-day life. And this is where the adequacy gospel comes from. See, Jesus was not rich. No. But he wasn't poor either. He had a balance. He was financially independent. Whenever he needed money, he knew how to find it. And Jesus was very much aware of the financial realities of his time. If you recall, there was a time he needed to pay his taxes. They asked him to pay tax. So he had to send a disciple out to go and catch a fish, and somewhere in the mouth of the fish, the disciple found a coin, came and paid the tax. Do we remember that? He sat down, watched people giving offerings. He made a comment about the widow's mite. He was very much aware of the financial realities of his time. You know, he had a treasurer. How many people realize that Jesus had a treasurer? Does the name Judas Iscariot sound familiar? You know Judas's role in the apostles? He was their treasurer. You don't believe me? He was their treasurer. You remember the occasion when some woman came and anointed Jesus' feet with some expensive oil? We are told that typical finance man, he said, why don't we sell this oil and put the money where the money should be? And we are told that he had charge of the money bag and used to help himself, but he had charge of it. Among the disciples, there was a treasurer. And this is where I get even into more controversy. When I tell people that there's very little spiritual or human benefit in being poor. I mean, we are told that the destruction of the poor is their poverty. If you've been into certain situations, you've been to certain areas, and you see how poverty works. There was a time my work took me to a country that at the time was a world's third poorest country, right? I spent my first 2 weeks in that country. I called my friends in Ghana. I told them, stop complaining. You guys are in heaven. If you come and see what is going on here, guys, stop complaining. Just stop complaining. You go to visit a community and everything has to be finished by some particular time because once it gets dark, there's no light. We have street lights in Ghana and these people are complaining. Look, you go to some places that there's no light. There's no running water. You live in their so-called capital city. They give you a pickup to drive to the airport to go and pick people up. And that drive is an obstacle course. You're avoiding manholes. We are told destruction of the poor is their poverty. It's a very destructive state to be in. Some fantastic people manage to live off very little. But those same people I like to point out that when it came to the crunch, they always knew where to find provision. When Elijah was sent out to go and hide himself somewhere, ravens were sent to feed him. You ask yourself why? And interestingly, there's an interesting parable Jesus gave. And this parable, it still confuses Christian scholars to this day. How many of us are aware of the parable of the unjust steward? When Jesus tells us a story about somebody who was managing the resources of a master, the master calls him and says, "You're not doing your job well. I'm going to fire you." The man sees poverty in front of him. He says, "I'm too old to work and I'm too proud to beg." The man sees poverty in front of him. What does the man begin to do? He begins to strike deals. Yeah? He says, "Hey, my man, come. How much you owe that man? 1,000. Look, make it 800. How much you owe that man? 200. Make it 150. He strikes these deals to ensure that when he loses his job, these people will sort him out. Hand go, hand come. And we are told that the master hears about this, and the master actually commends him for being so smart. And Jesus ends by saying that the sons of this world are smarter. They are smarter. They are smarter than the children of the kingdom. They're smarter. They are harsh realities. And particularly living in the part of the world where capitalism is the driving force, there are harsh realities we have to face. Like it or not. And the Christian is in the middle of all this. The Christian is in the middle of all this. He hasn't got the option to opt out. No. He hasn't. Because I tell people that direct debits respect no religion. When the time is due, they will go. They respect no religion. Honestly, when the time is due. Reality check. You notice I emphasized on that point in Paul's letter to Timothy, where he said, the love of money is the root of all kinds of emphasis on the word love. You see, but we're talking adequacy. We're not talking greed. The love of money is greed. We're not talking greed. But I'm telling you that if the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, try the lack of money. You will do worse evil. Try it when it's not there. Try it when it's not there. You will do worse. Try it when it's not there. You will do worse. I came across one brother who was telling me about the beginnings of his ministry. He's into song ministration. And he was talking about the beginnings of his ministry when he was fresh in this country. Because of immigration challenges, he couldn't work in certain places. And every Sunday, when he had to go to church to minister, he would have to walk from his house to the church. A walk of over 2 hours. And because he didn't want people to see him walking, he had to navigate a special route. So where he could have gone quickly from one point to the other, he has to navigate through buildings and around back routes. That's because he didn't want people to see him walking there. And he said the worst experience is when after walking 2 hours to get to a place to go and minister, after the service, all they tell you is, thank you, God bless you. He said that was one of the worst experiences. Even the means of transport back is a challenge. If they say the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, I'm not disputing that. But I'm telling you that from what I have seen in the practical world we are in now, the lack of money is an equally effective route to evil. It's a danger. And it's a danger the Christian is best avoiding. Because when the pressure is on, the last thing you are thinking about is some moral standard. I tell people, you cannot teach morality to a hungry man. When he sees food, he'll eat it. You can't come and tell me Jesus loves me when my stomach is empty. I won't hear you. You're wasting your time. I won't hear you. So the key to all of this, to the Christian's approach to money, the Christian's approach to finances, is a reasoned balance. We're told in the book of Ecclesiastes that wisdom is a defense and money is a defense, but the excellency of knowledge is that wisdom gives life to them that have it. So we want to balance in wisdom. In that same book, we are told that a feast is made for laughter and wine makes life merry, but money answers everything. Without money, there will be no feast, there will be no wine. that laughter and that merriment, it won't happen when the money isn't there. In the book of Proverbs, he says, 2 things I ask of you, Lord. Do not refuse me before I die. He says, keep falsehood and lies far from me. But then he says, give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Does that sound familiar? Because somewhere in the Lord's Prayer, what did Jesus say? Give us today our daily bread. You see, we're talking adequacy. He says, otherwise, I may have too much and disown you and say, who is the Lord? Or I may become poor and steal, and so dishonor the name of my God. Are we seeing that around us today? Are we seeing the frauds, the thefts, the scandals that are happening in the kingdom? Are we seeing that around us today? So once again, I've not come to lead you into temptation. No. I've come to talk about adequacy. So, when we come to talk about keeping financial hope alive during this cost of living crisis, what choices do we have? What choices does a Christian have? I find the Christian has 2 choices. One is to bury your head in the sand, like the ostrich, and just hope and pray that this crisis passes. Just hope and pray that it passes. And keep hoping and praying. But a point I like to make, and the reason why I like that image, is that if you have your head buried in the sand, you are in a perfect position for an ass kicking. You see the way the ass is sticking out? And there's no ass kicker more effective than the devil. He will kick that ass real good. I can guarantee that. The other choice we have is to study financial management. Be honest and realistic about money, about finances. They are a necessity. We need them. It's to be honest and realistic about them. And remove a lot of the myths that we have in our minds. A lot of these things that have been programmed into our minds. A lot of these lies and God knows what. But just face financial management in its reality. So out of these 2 choices, those that choose to bury their head in the sand, I leave to enjoy their ass kicking. But for those that would want to study financial management, I move on to the next slide. So during this cost of living crisis, what financial management options does a Christian have? We have 2 options. One is efficiency. That is where we work towards the effective management of our existing resources. Because that is the most convenient place to start from, looking at what you currently have. That is that you have. We're told in the book of Proverbs to know well the condition of our flocks and pay attention to our herds. So we look at being efficient with what we have. The other option is to look at expansion, working towards expanding our future resources, increasing our future resources. We are told in the book of Ecclesiastes, sow your seed in the morning, and at evening let not your hands be idle, for you do not know which will succeed, whether this or that or both will do equally well. So we have the option of efficiency, we have the option of expansion, or we have the combination of both. Are we ready to look further? So let's look first at efficiency. Because like I said, that's the most convenient place to start from. We're looking at what we already have. When we're talking about efficiency, we're looking at managing what we currently have as well as possible. Because that's absolutely key. You start from where you are. Now, to be efficient, when it comes to finances, it's 2 aspects. First, we're going to work towards ensuring that we spend less than we earn. And when we're able to establish a difference we will try and invest that difference wisely into wealth creation. Why am I talking about spending less than you earn? Because this is the bottom line. I don't care how much you earn. If you regularly spend more than you earn, you will always be under financial pressure. That is it. How many times don't we hear of pop stars who live in multi-million-dollar mansions, God knows whatever, something small happens and within months they are flat broke. Within months they are flat broke. They get flat broke so quickly, you wonder like, what happened? Like, how did that happen? It is because this basic reality, spending less than you earn, this basic reality is often missed out by lots of people. Because in a lot of cases, you find people tend to do the opposite. And for today's Christian, the force that drives us is this fakeness we see on social media. It's this fakeness we see on social media. It's all around us. It's all around us. Somebody will come and give some testimony about how they went somewhere and they were given some oil, and when he went and put the oil on the front of his door, that day he made so many sales, and someone walked into his shop and gave him a brand new contract, bloody, 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 blab. And at a point, what I began to do was trying to note the people that gave these testimonies, you see, and then go and look for them. No, results don't lie. If what he said in the testimony was true, when I go looking for him, well, I should see it, shouldn't I? A couple of months ago, there was this crusade in Kenya, and some man of God was supposed to have gone there and claimed to have healed so many cripples that there were wheelchairs and crutches and everything in excess. And then we heard the government got in touch with him and said, well, wonderful work, but in this country, we have a system of support for invalids. So if you have healed all these people, bring us a list of the people you have healed so we can take them off the list of invalids. Yeah. Well, what if they are healed? Well, let's see them. We'll take them off the list of benefits. We'll take them off. Results don't lie. If what you did there was true, then, well, you've got to evidence it. You know, interestingly, in the gospel narrative, there was a man Jesus healed from leprosy. Jesus told him, go and show yourself to the chief priest. Yeah, let him certify you. I may have healed you, but someone else needs to certify you. So go and show yourself to the chief priest. Get certified, and then it's clear that you are healed. There was a man who had been blind from birth, whose eyes Jesus opened. And the Pharisees tried to shut him up. They called his parents. The parents said, hey, the man is old enough. Let him talk for himself. The man was called and he said, look, I don't know all your theories and religions. I was blind, now I see. End of story. Results don't lie. But the Christian is increasingly being driven by falsehood to put themselves in places they shouldn't be. Because you're in a congregation and every week somebody has a testimony. Every week somebody has a breakthrough. So you also think you also need to break through. So you start attempting to break through, and in breaking through, you end up breaking yourself. It's not easy. The pressure on today's Christian is not easy. But this is the bottom line. If you regularly spend more than you earn, you will always be under financial pressure. And that is not a place you want to be in. So let's begin this process of efficiency. Let's get efficient. The first thing we need to do is to know exactly what our income is at the moment from a starting point. How much are we earning? We want to determine exactly how much confirmed income we have. And it's important to emphasize on the word confirmed. You see, because another practice I've come across is this faith income that Christians seem to have. You know, I've seen churches write faith check. Yes, I mean, the lease is due and they don't have the money, but they write a check by faith. And then they post the check to the landlord in the belief that by the time the lease is due, by some miracle, some money will appear in the bank account and the landlord can cash the check. I've seen faith checks written. You know, I've had people who are not Christians at all, but they have told me that because they regularly buy lottery tickets, they project that by the end of the year, they would have won at least 3 times. And so when you are working with them to budget, they put projected winnings in the budget. And I'm like, hello, hello, hello. Confirmed income. If you can't confirm it, you ain't got it. It's that simple. And the good thing about confirmed income is that when you're looking at the income you can confirm, you then begin to think about what other sources of income you can find. And I always find that people have a surprise. The surprise is either one of 2 things. The other surprise at actually how much they are getting in without realizing, or they are surprised at actually how little they are getting in. But this is an important exercise, and this is the beginning. Determine exactly how much confirmed income you have. The next step is we need to know exactly what we're spending money on. And that is extremely important. What I like to do, particularly in this regard, is to do an exercise with people where I say, look, let's take a 4-week period, 1 month. Get yourself a small notebook. Put it in your pocket all the time. For every time you spend, write it in that notebook. That's all I need you to do. Just any time you spend, write it in that notebook. Anytime you spend, anytime you tap your card, your ping, ping, ping things, just write it in that notebook. And at the end of the month, end of these 4 weeks, we will sit down together, we'll take your bank statements, we'll take that little notebook, and we'll make a list of everything you've spent. And we'll begin to total them up. And every time I take people through this exercise, there's always a surprise. You'll be surprised where your money goes. You'll be absolutely surprised. But it is absolutely important to know what it is you're spending your money on. Because expenses have this habit of creeping up on you. Because some of them just come by sheer habit. Even habits that you're not aware of, it just creeps up on you. But not knowing what you're spending money on is a trap many people fall into. And this is a fact. Unless you know exactly what you're spending money on, you're very likely wasting money. Horrible fact. Horrible fact. I recall my early years in this system. The first time I did this exercise in this country, I found to my shock and surprise that the 3rd biggest item of expenditure I was carrying out in a month was doner kebab. I kid you not. Oh, I used to love doner kebab. If you want to bribe me with something, give me a doner. I used to love doner kebab. And I had this practice when on my way home from work, there was this fantastic place in New Cross where they made this fantastic doner. I'll get off the bus there, grab my doner, get into another bus and come home. When I tallied my spend, the 3rd highest spend was doner kebab. If anyone had told me that you're spending this much money on doner kebab, I'd say, my man, get lost. It's just, I buy this thing end of every evening. Like when I go to work, it's like, why is that such a big? How much does it even cost at the time? Like what? £9.50. Yeah. £9.50, 5 days a week. End of the month. It creeps up on you. It creeps up on you. And the worrying thing for me was that I actually knew that this doner kebab business wasn't very healthy. I knew it was unhealthy. I considered it my vice, and I thought because I was just doing it end of every day, it shouldn't be too bad. Not only was I wasting money, I was ruining my health. I was paying twice. And unless you know exactly what you're spending money on, you're very likely wasting money. That's why it's so important to understand what it is you're spending the money on. And that's why this notebook exercise, I always encourage everyone to do it. Regardless, even if you don't think you're under financial pressure, just do it. Just do it. You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised. And in fact, in today's world where lots of things are done by card, it's even worse. You see, back in the day when you actually had to take money out of your wallet, that process of taking the money out, sometimes it jacks your mind. Yeah. Today, even it's on your phone. You push one button and some card thing comes up, bing, 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 there you go. I did a funny exercise about somewhere last year. I did this very funny exercise where my budget for transportation, I put it on a specific card that I then linked to my Apple Pay. Because I was thinking that the only place I use that Apple thing is when I'm getting on a bus and getting on a train. So I put my monthly budget for transport on that Apple Pay thing and see what happens by the end of the month. By the middle of the month, I'd run out of that money. I went to look, what happened there? Apart from the bus, you go to the off license. Bim. Anywhere you see a card thing that you have to buy, Bim. In my mind, I thought that budget was only for transport. No, there were so many things eaten into it. It's so easy to spend now and just lose track of what you're spending because it's electronic. It's electronic. And that's how it creeps up on us. So I always encourage everyone, just do this exercise. Just do this exercise, and you'll be surprised what you find out. Now, once we've done this thing, I want us to then begin to think of our financial life as our busyness. I want us to get busy about managing our financial life. That's our busyness. Yeah, that's our personal business. That's for us. But once we have this incoming and outgoings, let's look at the list we have. The list of income, the list of spend. Let's just look at these lists. We should be able to account for any difference between the two lists. If we can't account for the difference, we're wasting money somewhere. If we can't account for the difference, we're wasting money somewhere. But the plus with it is that we're then able to identify all the expenses we're able to cut back on. A lot of time when you tell people about cutting back on the expenses, you often tell you that, oh, I don't think there's anything I can cut. I don't think there's anything I can cut. You take them through this exercise, and sometimes without you having to say anything more, they themselves identify the things they can. You don't need to say anything more. Just take them through this exercise and just watch them. They themselves begin to see the things they can eliminate, the things that are completely unnecessary. And once we've done this, we're then going to draw a budget and we're going to stick to it. See, there's two sides to this budgeting business. It's a process of actually drawing the budget, and then it's the discipline to stick to it. Because when it comes to spending, we are creatures of habit. And habits die hard. Old habits die hard. I remember earlier on, once again in this system, I used to be a security guard. And I was guarding a Primark shop in Lewisham. You look surprised. If I tell you the jobs I've done in this country, some of you will be shocked. No kidding. If I tell you some of the jobs I've done in this system, some of you will be shocked. That's a conversation for another day, right? But I used to be a security guard, and I was guarding Primark in Lewisham. And it was one thing I just found so very amusing, right? Is that you're standing at the door, yeah? And these ladies walk in. Oh, hi. Oh, I'm just going to have a little look around, and I'll see you in a minute. All right, hi. Going to have a little look around. You're standing there. You see that lady coming towards you, and she's carrying 4 or 5 bags. How did little look around translate to 4 or 5 bags? Oh, they're on sale. Oh, they're on bargain. Oh, and it's cheaper here than in M&S, and it looks the same, so I just had to get it. When they were walking past the shop, it wasn't part of their budget to buy anything in the shop. Sheer habit. They go in there and they see deals, they see offers, they see sales. And by the time you know, they've got 4 bags coming out with them. Sticking to a budget requires discipline. It's not easy. It's not easy. But it's a discipline that will take you very far. And there's 2 sides to this budgeting thing that I really want to emphasize on. The first is to identify any debts you have. In this capitalist system, it's impossible not to have a debt. You will owe money. You have a mortgage, you owe money. You have a car, you mostly owe money. You will owe money on something. The credit deals, the pay now, the buy now, pay in 24 months, the buy now, pay in whatever months, no interest. All these things are credit deals. They're debts. It's actually money you owe. If you don't believe you owe that money, miss 2 payments and you'll see. Just miss 2 payments. You will find out very quickly whether or not you really owe money. All these things are debts. But the trap of credit is that because it is made so convenient to pick up, most people just spend. They say, oh, it's only £9.50 a month for the next 24 months. They sign up to it. Then something else comes up. They say, oh, that is £5.50 a month. They sign up to it. Something else comes up. Oh, that's £11.50 a month. They sign up to it. When you do the expenditure exercise with them, and you add up these per month, they are surprised at how much these things actually add up to. Credit is not a bad thing. It's good. But credit should be used carefully. You use credit on necessities, not on luxuries. If an item is a luxury, you don't do it on credit. You do it from your saving. You use credit on necessities, not on luxuries. Capitalism will throw credit at you. I recall it used to be when you opened a bank account and you got 2 salary payments, the bank wrote to you and offered you a credit card. You didn't even have to ask for it. They offer it to you. They offer it to you. And with that credit card, you then feel you have a new power to spend. But the harsh reality of this financial business is that for somebody to make money, you have to lose it. You see? That's the way it works. That's the way it works. It's a very simple, interesting formula. Very, very simple, interesting formula. Working in Sainsbury's. I used to work in Sainsbury's as well. Sure, Michimao. You guys, you know. Like I said, it's a conversation for another day. But working in Sainsbury's, when you had a sales target in your area of operation, one thing I found worked very effectively was always to lure the mothers who came into the shop with their children. If you can make a child want something, the mother will buy it. That was my formula. And I was always exceeding my targets. It worked like magic. Ignore the mother. Focus on the child. Wouldn't you like this? She's nice. This will look nice in your room, won't it? Once the child wants it, the mother will buy it. For me to meet my target, someone got to spend money. I don't care whether you need it or not. I want you to spend. Because that's the only way I'm going to meet my target, if you spend. Very simple trick. Very effective. Very effective. And in fact, my supervisor at the time was very puzzled because he wondered, look, you're not married, are you? I said, no. You don't have any children. Did you have children in your country of origin? I said, no. But you're fantastic at children's sales. I said, oh, it's just the blessing of the Lord. It's just the blessing of the Lord. It's just the blessing of the Lord. No, it wasn't. There was a trick in there. But that's the harsh reality. That's the harsh reality. All around you, there's several forces competing to get money out of your pocket, one way or the other. All around you. In fact, these days in London, they tell you that the driver is an endangered species. Everywhere you look, there's some fine or some camera or some everywhere. I mean, even now to drive through the Blackwall Tunnel will cost you money. That tunnel has been working for free for God knows how long. Today you drive through that Blackwall Tunnel, it costs you money. Yeah. And they've placed the thing so very carefully that it's in line with rush hour. So rush in the morning when everyone is going into the city, that is where the fee is. In the evening when everyone is coming back home, that is where the fee is. You're like an endangered species. Everything around. Everything is trying to take money from you. But that is a harsh reality the Christian finds themselves in. There's what we cannot control, which is what is happening in the environment. What we can't control is how we react to that environment. Am I talking to someone? So, action station. Once we have all this information, we need to make a plan that will enable us meet our financial goals. Yesterday, we spoke about goals and how important goals are, how goals get us to focus our resources, focus our power, focus our faith. The whole rationale of this process is to set ourselves a financial goal. What would be adequate for us? You can pursue surplus, nothing wrong with it. But in the area of efficiency, we're looking at adequacy. What would be adequate for us? And with that financial goal, we then need a plan that helps us to achieve that goal. The other habit I recommend is savings. Just having this habit of saving something every month. I don't care how small it is. Even if it's £1. Just building that habit of saving. Because there's something interesting about that habit. It builds a momentum. Once you start the practice, you begin to find other ways of saving. Doesn't matter how small, build that habit. Build that habit of saving something every month. Next is to look at your debts. And the ones to be afraid of are the ones that incur interest. You see these credit card deals they keep throwing at you. When you get to the end of the month and you cannot clear the balance, they tell you, oh, it's fine. We'll roll it over to next month. Watch your statement when it comes. You'll see some interest there. I've met people who are in debt, not because of what they initially bought, but because of the interest that accumulated. The interest put them in more debt than what they initially bought. Any debt that incurs interest, you want to get rid of it as quickly as possible. Because with our brothers, the bankers, they make the interest compound. So if they lent you £100 and you are not able to pay the £100 by the end of month 1, and they say it is fine, we'll let it roll over, they'll charge £10 interest on it. So come the end of month 2, you owe 110. If you're not able to clear it then, they say fine, we'll let it roll over. But at the end of month 2, they are not working the interest on the £100 you originally borrowed. They are working the interest on the £110 that you owed at the end of month 1. That's how they work that interest business out. You'll be surprised how quickly the interest becomes bigger than the loan you took in the beginning. You'll be astonished. And these days they come at you and say, 24 months, no interest. Or 12 months, no interest. But then take a look at the small print. At the end of that 24 months, no interest, the interest rate that is waiting in the corner frighten you. Will frighten you. They are in business. That's what they are there to do. They are there to make money. And I was told of a Turkish proverb that says, beware the naked man that offers you his shirt. They're in business to make money. So whatever offers they are giving you that seem to appear is not making them any money, you want to be extremely careful. Now let's look at expansion. With expansion, we're going into looking at how we'll increase our resources. And this is a situation where, having taken stock, we realize that we're in a situation of inadequacy. We need to expand in order to be adequate. Because the harsh reality we're facing with this cost of living crisis is that is what most of us are facing. Earnings are not increasing, but expenses are increasing. It wasn't that long ago when we had one of our lovely sisters who came to power, and she had a brother from our country, and they did some very mysterious economical thing, and interest rates just went through the roof. And poor people, some of whose mortgage deals were coming to the end and had to renegotiate new mortgage deals. Some of them were going from 1.2% to 5.6%. Like, it just catapulted like that. Now imagine facing such a situation. You have to expand your resources, else you're going under. It's that simple. So when we talk about expansion, once again, I'm not advocating greed. I'm not leading you into temptation. No. I'm leading you to look at the realities required to help us expand. Because if we're to keep hope alive in these difficult circumstances, we need either to be very efficient or we need to understand how to expand. I'd like to state an inconvenient truth. Once again, something that our Christian brethren will find controversial. But I learned the hard way that being saved does not guarantee success or wealth. Being saved is about your soul, yeah? That is dealing with the hereafter and whatever. But there are no guarantees of wealth or success in there. And neither does grace. The business of grace is to give you access to divinity, and that is it. In the book of 1 Corinthians 15, verse 10, the Apostle Paul was talking about how in the adequacy of grace, he still labored more than everyone around him. See, the grace, he says, but by the grace of God, I am what I am. and his grace to me was not without effect. He says, no, I worked harder than all of them. I want you to look, he says, I worked harder than all of them. So even in the midst of grace, the man had to work. We're told in some places he worked as a tent maker. In some places he worked. Look, even in the midst of grace, the man had to work. So this belief that was pushed around a while ago and still is, that just because you have grace. I mean, I recall, I'm trying to remember now, Jabez, the prayer of Jabez. In fact, these days you don't hear it anymore. But there was a time when this was on every minister's lips. Yeah? And it's some short narrative in the Old Testament where someone had a prayer to God, and after that prayer, the persons began to expand and everything. And the ministers began to teach this thing and said, if you pray the prayer of Jabez, you begin to see miracles happen in your life. Books were sold, cassettes were distributed, and people Jabezed and Jabezed and Jabezed. But like I said earlier, results don't lie. Today, you don't hear them talk about the prayer of Jabez any longer, do you? You see what fadism does to us as Christians. You see what fadism does to us as Christians. Because the narrative is often summarized. The gap between the beginning and the end is often summarized. But somewhere in the middle, there's been some very hard work done. Someone's worked very hard. Paul was the first person to begin to advocate grace. Talk about the grace of God, talk about the grace of God, talk about the grace of God. But nowhere will you find Paul saying that I simply relied on grace and did not work. He never says it anywhere. He talks about grace one sentence, the next minute he's talking about how hard he's working. And if we allow ourselves to be drawn into this mistaken belief that grace will compensate for hard work, we're being misled. It would be great if it did. Come on, who doesn't want an easy life? Who doesn't want an easy life? But the harsh reality is that even those that will stand on stage and proclaim grace and miracles and all whatever, you look behind that image, you'll be surprised how hard they actually work. When I used to work in Hackney and working with some of these street gangs, I met this guy who told me that he knew for a fact that the reason why he was the most successful burglar in Hackney is that no one worked harder than he did. Yeah. He said the reason why he was the most successful burglar in Hackney is that no one worked harder than he did. He said, Uncle Ray, some of my guys take a break. They get one success and they take a break. I don't. And this is a burglar. So, to increase our income generation capacity, which is a beginning of expansion. So when we're looking at efficiency, don't forget, we first determined what income we had coming in. Now, if in the course of that efficiency exercise, we then realized that the income was inadequate, we then had to expand our income. We had to increase our income, right? Yesterday, we spoke a lot about power and the sources of power available to us. Now that, my friends, is the beginning of expansion. We are told, you shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he that gives you the power to get wealth. And you see, I find this particular verse very interesting. It didn't say that it is he that gives you wealth. No. It said it is he that gives you what? The power to get wealth. So even when you're handed power, you've got to do something with that power. You see? But we are told in the book of Proverbs that if the axe is blunt, you have to put in more effort to cut the wood. See? Learning to connect to your sources of power sharpens that axe. It makes you more efficient. Because the writer in the book of Ecclesiastes says, I have seen something else under the sun. He says, the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the learned. He says, but time and chance happen to them all. And the question I always ask is, who controls time and who controls chance? That is your advantage as Christians. You have a direct access to the one that controls time and the one that controls chance. And the ability to have creative ideas. You remember yesterday when we were talking about meditation, when we're talking about visualization. This is how it comes into practical effect. The ability to have creative ideas. Warren Buffett said a man only needs one idea to live like a king the rest of his life. That's all you need. One good idea, he said. But the ability to have that creative idea is what we have direct access to. I always find this story of Jacob very interesting. When he was working for Laban, and Laban wanted to keep the man working for him as long as possible, keep him in that corner. And he was told at a point that he will be given the freckled lambs, and the pure white ones will be kept for his master. And somehow, in the days before psychology, in the days before science, Jacob got the idea of visualization. Where the sheep went to water, he put freckled images there. As the sheep saw the freckled, they were producing freckled children. We spoke about visualization yesterday, and I told you that all these principles that are being sold to us in books, they're in your Bible. They're in your Bible. And long before anyone thought of putting them down in any specific format, where do you think Jacob got the idea from? Where do you think he got the idea from? That is one of your biggest assets as a Christian. That ability to tap into divine power. So yesterday we spoke about two sources of power. If you remember our sessions from yesterday, we spoke about individual power, we spoke about group power, we spoke about divine power. Whatever you do, learn to release whatever power you can tap into. Be it as an individual, as a group, tapping into the divine, just learn to release that power you can tap into. And having set your divine financial position as a goal, you use that power to work towards achieving that goal. That is how we expand as Christians. That is how we have lasting expansion as Christians. Not this brief social media type where you are here one day and gone the next. Where you are here one day and scandal happens and tomorrow you are flying somewhere. No. We follow the blueprint. It might not be as quick and as lightning flashy as the other options, but it is stable and it lasts. It was interesting when I was reflecting on all this thinking, positive thinking, and all the offshoots that came from it. I mean, all the way back to writers like James Allen, Napoleon Hill, You then came to Andrew Carnegie. You came to Norman Vincent Peale. You came to the modern era like Brian Tracy, Anthony Robbins, you name them. In fact, now it's become a business, right? And what they are doing now is that they create this huge marketing thing, and someone tells you that, look, I have this secret that enabled me to 10, 20,000 into whatever over 8 weeks and whatever. If you come to my seminar, I will teach you the secret in my seminar. Your payment is his income. You go and sit in those seminars, and all they do is to regurgitate all this historical knowledge. As you keep paying, he keeps expanding. And next thing you know, he's living some affluent lifestyle. And when you scratch the surface, you realize he had no business to begin with. Your payments made him rich. But the interesting thing about all of this positive thinking and everything that came with it, the early writers, the James Allens, the Napoleon Hills, the Norman Vincent Peales, interestingly, they would quote a lot of scriptures in their writings. You would find a lot of scriptures in their writings. As time went on, the scriptural influence began to disappear. The reason for that is that they may have learnt it from the scriptures, but they realize that it works whether or not you understand scripture. You buy all of these modern writers, Anthony Robbins, you don't find any reference to scripture in it. Just go back 50 years to when it first started. There were Bible quotations all over those books. But they realized that principle is principle. So they took the principles and ran with it. You have access to the beginning of that principle, the base principles. You've got it. We got to do more with it. Yesterday we spoke about the parable of the talents. Someone got 5, someone got 3, someone got... See, and the interesting thing was this. The one who got 5 excitedly went and worked with his 5. He was one of the special ones. The one who got 3, in between the one who got 1 and who got 5, would have made a very interesting decision where he would have decided, 5 man, your 5 is your business. 1 man, your 1 is your business. I've got 3. I'm going to work with my 3. I'm going to use what I've got. You keep your 5, hallelujah to you. You keep your 1, bless you. I've got my 3, I'm going to work with my 3. The guy who had the 1, he looked at 5 and said, hey, that guy has 5. He looked at 3, that guy has 3. And I only have 1. This is a disadvantage. So let me protect the 1 I have. And when the master comes back, I'll give him the 1 that he gave me. The master's anger at him was not because you returned the 1. The master didn't lose. He gave the man 1, the man gave 1 back to him. He didn't lose. But he said, at least if you had, even when you wanted to preserve it, yeah, if you had preserved it in the right place, I would have got some interest on it. I used to use this example about David Beckham, our famous David Beckham, the footballer. It was interesting. I read a book written by Paul Scholes. I read another one written by Phil Neville. The interesting thing about Beckham was that actually he was one of the most limited footballers in that Man United squad. Believe it or not. He couldn't use his left foot. He only had his right foot. In fact, he couldn't even head the ball properly. Did you ever see David Beckham score a header? Where's Kelly? He's the one. Did you ever see David Beckham score a header? Nah. The man couldn't even head the ball properly. There were players like Paul Scholes in that team. Paul Scholes can work magic with a football. There were players like Ryan Giggs. All Beckham had was that right foot. But he developed the use of that right foot to the extent it took him further than he was the most famous person in that team. But if you're talking raw talent, he was the most limited. It's not what you've got, it's what you do with what you've got. That makes a difference. And it's true, I don't think Beckham is a Christian. I don't think so. He just followed principle. Where people can head and chest and use both legs, I've only got this one leg. But I'm going to make sure that with this one leg, I'll be so accurate that when it comes to any dead ball situation, I'm the first person on everyone's mind. This one right leg. Am I talking to somebody? The next thing we're going to do is to learn to connect to our divine power source. This, my fellow Christians, is your game changer. Your ability to draw on divinity. This is your game changer. This is your game changer. All the people you hear about through the historical narrative of the Bible, whatever, the game changer was their ability to draw on divinity. And even when it looked like all the odds were against them, this ability turned the situation around for them. In the book of Psalms, the Psalm 82, verse 6, the psalmist asks a question. He says, "What is man that you have made him a little lower than Elohim?" Did you ever read that? Go back and check. He says, "Look, you are gods." Let's go back one verse. He said, "I said, you are gods. You are all sons of the Most High." This psalm, Jesus quoted when the Pharisees accused him of using evil to work his miracles. Jesus quoted this psalm. He told them that if the scripture says that you are gods, you sons of the Most High, and he said, and scripture cannot be broken. I told you yesterday that you're a replica of the Creator. If you didn't understand me yesterday, this is the evidence. You don't just find it in the Old Testament. Jesus himself quotes it in the New Testament. If you are looking for a credit to the debit, you got it right there. Don't underrate your power. Don't. Like we saw yesterday. The power in the battery remains the power in the battery. If you kick the battery, the power is still there. If you paint the battery, the power is still there. If the battery is black, the power is still there. Whatever you do to the battery, the power is still there. The next thing, connecting to our divine source, then is to ask for guidance from that source. Like the master said, ask and ye shall receive. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be opened unto you. I often think that part of the challenge we have as Christians is that some of the most effective tools we have are too simple. We like complexity. You see, it has to be complex. We have to go and buy some olive oil. And then we have to come and give it to some unique man of God who then has to pray on it. Yeah. Then we have to go and paint our forehead with it and dance around it and somersault. And then only then can we feel that the power of the Lord is at work. We like complexity. But the one who brought us the blueprint taught simplicity. 3-stage formula. That simple. In fact, too simple. When you think about it, sometimes when you look at the complexity of the situation, you think this formula is too simple. But that is the blueprint we've been given. That simple. And yesterday we spoke about that dogged persistence that faith in action requires. We spoke about Elijah and what happened on Mount Carmel. Elijah asked for the rain to come. He asked 7 times. That dogged persistence. He asked 7 times. Because he asked from a place of knowledge. He asked from a place of awareness. So he knew there was the answer there. And so he asked 7 times. With focus, with persistence, he put the ask through. And what seemed impossible became possible. This is your game changer. And once you learn to apply both, no, that's fine. Let's go on to the next slide. Once you learn to tap both into your personal power and you learn to tap into your divine power, you then apply both these powers in your endeavors. That is your advantage as a Christian. Where your personal power runs out, the divine is there. It's there to bring you ideas. It's there to bring you inspiration. It's there to bring you opportunity. It's there to bring you motivation. It's there to bring you capability. You know, one of our teachers, Mike Murdoch, he taught that there's 3 functions of an authority over your life. He said provision, promotion, protection. That is what we get from divinity. Those without divinity do it from personal power. We have divinity. We combine the two. But if we are to expand in these troubling and tricky times, this is expansion we need. This is a combination of power we need. It won't happen by wishing. It won't happen by hoping. It won't happen by whatever easy option we think there is. We've got to put our hand to the plow and work. Now, I like to address what I call excuses, because I always find that my Christian brethren are fantastic with excuses. And I always say there's a need to differentiate between excuses and reasons. But the danger of excuses is that excuses prevent you from progressing. They keep you stuck where you are. And the sad thing about excuses is that most people that use excuses actually know that they are lying to themselves. But sometimes it is a fear of stepping out. See, I like to give a personal example. My early days in the system, I began to work with a volunteer group. And at a point, I became an internal auditor for national charity on a volunteer basis. And because I already done auditing in my country of origin, I just found it like second nature. I was doing this thing and I was doing so well. And there was this man who was head of that operation. The man just took a liking to me because of the outcomes I was producing. And one day this man called me. He told me that there's a meeting coming up in central London, right? And there's going to be some people there. He said, I need you to come because I want to introduce you to some of these people. So I got up and I dressed. And then I looked at myself in the mirror. And that's where my problems began. You see, in the year 2000, just before I came into this country, I began to suffer from alopecia. Who knows what alopecia is? Hair loss. I looked at myself in the mirror and I thought, wait a minute. You're black. You're a migrant. You have alopecia. Where do you think you're going? Where do you think you're going? Central London? Bond Street? Is that where you think you're going? I called this man and I gave him some rubbish excuse as to why I couldn't come. I didn't go. Didn't go. Time passed. A good 5 years later. By then, I'd managed to break through into the professional ranks. I go to attend a seminar, and this man is there. He sat on the stage. Man is looking at me. At the end of the seminar, the man gets up and makes a he walks straight. He makes a beeline. The man just literally walked to me. In fact, I had bent down and I was putting my papers together, trying to make a quick escape. When I raised my head, I saw the guy was coming at me, so there was no way to escape. But the man came straight to me. We greeted each other. And he said, "What are you up to these days?" And at that time, I was the head of finance and administration for another charity. So I showed him my badge. I said, "Oh, actually, I'm the head of finance and administration for the charity there." And I gave him my card. The man told me one thing I never forgot. He said, as far back as 2001, I knew you were far more capable of what you were doing. But I also realized you were too stupid to realize it. I never forgot that. One thing about our Ayivor brothers, they'll tell you the way it is. He said, I knew you were far more capable of what you were doing. But I also realized you were too stupid to realize it. On my way home, I thought, why did the guy call me stupid? Then I remembered that excuse, that phone call I gave. That is what excuses are. They are lies we tell ourselves when we are afraid to step out. But I tell you that when the voice of the Lord comes and tells you to step out, whatever disadvantage you think you have, God knows about it before he calls you. Whatever excuse you think, God knows about it before he calls you. Just go back in scripture and look. Who hasn't had an excuse? Moses said he was a stammerer. Yet when he got in front of Pharaoh, there's no record of him stammering. In fact, when he said he was a stammerer, God gave him Aaron to go and be a linguist. They get in front of Pharaoh and Aaron is quiet. Moses is doing the talking. What happened to that stammer? Gideon said he was the smallest of his clan. He was the smallest of his people. Yet with 300 men behind him, the man knocks over an army. What happened to that smallness? Jeremiah says to God, I'm not a good speaker. Do you even know what you are talking about? God tells him, before you were in your mother's womb, before I placed you there. Whatever excuse you can think of, God knows it exists before he calls you. When he calls you, ignore the excuse, listen to the call. Because the excuse is a lie you choose to tell yourself. That excuse is a lie you choose to tell yourself. I like to use the example of David. When people talk about David being a man after God's heart, the point I make is that David was very likely an illegitimate child. And this is a point I make. When Samuel went to the house of Jesse and asked Jesse to bring forth his sons, Jesse himself had forgotten that David existed. Someone had to ask him, are these all your sons? And then they remembered. They remembered when the sons, the recognized sons of the house, were at home and taking authority. This one was tending sheep like a slave. Jesse had to be asked, are these all your sons? Only then did they remember. But I spoke earlier about using what you got. Because whilst he was there tending the sheep, he learned to kill lions. Whilst he was there tending the sheep, he learned to kill bears. Whilst he was there tending the sheep, he learned to control unruly behavior. Whilst he was there tending the sheep, he learned to survive without anything. And so when he encountered Goliath, the question on his mind is, who is this? Who is this? Who is this man that he dares talk against the armies of the... who is this? He's brought before the king, and the king looks at him and says, young man, can you handle this? What is his answer? The same God that taught me to kill a bear, the same God that taught me to kill a lion, that same God will deliver this Philistine into my hand. You use what you've got. If David hadn't decided to be a good shepherd, he wouldn't have learned to protect the sheep. If he hadn't learned how to protect the sheep, he would have been every bit as scared of Goliath as everybody else was. If you had told David when he was sent out to take care of the sheep, that taking care of this sheep will lead you to the throne of Israel, he would have told you were mad. Excuses. Excuses. It's only human. We look at a situation and the first thing that comes up in our mind is a reason why we cannot get what we desire. The first thing that comes in our mind is an excuse. I put reasons in brackets and I put the danger sign there as well. Because in some cases, there are reasons. If unfortunately, I recall back when we were in school, in our younger days when we had come into the faith and were so excessively audacious and thinking all kinds of garbage. And we would declare fasts, and people who had been diagnosed with ulcer will come and tell us that, look, we can't fast because we have ulcer. And we'll tell them that the cure for ulcer is fasting. And these poor boys will go and fast and end up in hospital. The difference between an excuse and a reason is wisdom. If the reason or the whatever you're thinking about is backed by wisdom, you're looking at a reason, not an excuse. But when you study whatever you're thinking and you realize that it is not backed by wisdom, you're dealing with an excuse, not a reason. And I tell you, there's 1,000 good excuses for failure. There is never one good reason. Be stronger than your excuses. Be stronger than your excuses. Excuses exist all around you. Be stronger than your excuses. Some will come and say, oh, I'm too old. I recall having a conversation recently with some guy who was talking about how old he was and how he felt at that age. There was nothing left. And then he asked if I wanted to grab some lunch with him. I said, okay, fine. The man takes me to a restaurant, a fast food restaurant. We're sat in the restaurant. And he's still talking about how old he was. And then I asked him, do you know where we're sitting? He says, oh yeah. We're in a KFC. I asked him, do you know how old Colonel Sanders was when he started the KFC SPC? He was older than you are right now. You and I are sitting in something started by an old man, and you are giving me an excuse of age. We're sitting in evidence that age doesn't prevent you from, and you're still giving me an excuse. It shut him up. 2 weeks later, he gives me a call. He's over in Hong Kong doing the very thing that he thinks his age could prevent him from doing. 2 weeks, the man was there. Excuses. Excuses. The first professional to call me stupid to my face, and the only professional to ever do that, was a mentor who realized I'd given an excuse when a reason was needed. An excuse will prevent you from expanding. Am I talking to somebody? So, just to summarize, to keep financial hope alive during the cost of living crisis, what actions do we need? We need to increase personal power and connect to divine power. We need to be efficient, make the most of what we already have. We need to investigate expansion to grow into the new levels of power. We need to grow into the levels we need with the power we have. That is how we keep financial hope alive in this cost of living crisis we find ourselves in as Christians. In closing, I want us to read Jeremiah 29:11 together. Can you give me that in the NIV? Yesterday you gave me some first one full of bizarre things. Can we read this together? Are we ready? Let's begin. He says, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Bless you.